This is Join Us in France, episode 539. 539. Bonjour, I'm Annie Sargent, and Join Us in France is the podcast where we take a conversational journey through the beauty, culture, and flavors of France. Today, I bring you a conversation with Vanessa Christman about her incredible journey through France, celebrating her mother's 75th birthday. From exploring historic abbeys and charming medieval towns to indulging in some wine tastings, and creating custom perfumes in Grasse, Vanessa shares all the details of their road trip. This episode is packed with travel tips, heartfelt moments, and practical advice for anyone planning a similar adventure or just wants the inspiration, especially when traveling with elderly family members. This podcast is supported by donors and listeners who buy my tours and services, including my itinerary consult service, my GPS self-guided tours of Paris on the Voice Map app, or take a day trip with me around the southwest of France in my electric car. You can browse all of that on my boutique, joinusinfrance.com/boutique. And remember, Patreon supporters get the podcast ad-free and as soon as it's ready. Click on the link in the show notes to enjoy this Patreon reward today. For the magazine part of the podcast, after my chat with Vanessa, I'll discuss some restaurant experiences I had while in Paris, including one that was entirely new to me. It was very strange. I also want to tell you about my new voice map tour because it's very cool. And a bit of a rant about the state of tours in Paris. Bonjour, Vanessa Christman, and welcome to Join Us in France.
Bonjour, Annie. I'm really excited to be here.
Thank you so much. So you had a trip in France with your family, and your trip took place June 5th through June 18th, 2024, right?
That is correct, yes.
Okay. And when I asked you for a good title, you said celebrating 75 years with a French road trip. So that sounds lovely. Who was turning 75? You were not, clearly.
My mother was turning 75. She actually turned 75 in January of this past year, and she had never been out of the country before.
Oh,
And she's been a Francophile for most of her life and had read about it when she was a child and still read pretty much any historical or book you can find about France. She will read. And so her kind of pitch to me was, if you help do the planning and drive me around, I will help make a trip to France happen because I've always wanted to go.
oh,
And
that's wonderful.
I seized that opportunity.
That's really, truly wonderful. So it was just you and your mother and a friend as well.
Yes, I had a friend ask if she could join the trip about kind of midway into the planning process. She's a longtime family friend who's my best friend and my mom's other daughter. So it was so wonderful to have her along.
Fantastic. That's great. I have one daughter, and one of her friends is also feels like, quite a daughter, but I have a lot of affection for her for sure.
Yes, absolutely. And it worked out well because we learned that we travel extremely well together. And so future trips, she's invited by default.
Fantastic. So where did you go? I want to get into that first. And also, how did you plan this trip? What did you do to plan this trip?
Well, where we went, it's really hard to kind of describe it quickly. We kind of planned it around the areas where my mom most wanted to see and kind of pit stops in between those areas, just because we didn't want to be stuck in a car. You know, we're Californians, so we're going to drive everywhere. I tried to pitch public transportation, but my mom was a bit nervous. She was most interested in seeing Provence, the Mediterranean, and the Loire Valley. Those are her three must-see destinations. And so we flew into Charles de Gaulle, rented a car, did a pit stop in Burgundy, which is an area I wanted to see, and it worked out well. I spent some days in the Mediterranean and Provence, and then drove all the way to the Loire Valley and spent some time there. We ping-ponged around pretty much a lot. A huge chunk of France, actually, around 2,000 miles in total.
Wow. Yeah, that's quite a bit. So you rented your car right from CDG.
Yes.
right from landing from California.
Well, we did spend an overnight next to the hotel just to decompress. And then the next morning we rented our car.
Okay. So you spent one night near the airport before you set off. Yeah,
Yes.
because from California, that's a lot. The jet lag really hits you, right?
It does. I have a really nice little app that I found that I don't want to go into too much of a tangent of it, but it was developed for astronauts, actually. So you kind of put in your flight times and it tells you a few days before when to go to sleep and when to wake up to try to like acclimate you to the new time zone.
Oh,
And I've done it in a few trips to France and it works pretty well. I was strict on my travel companions and jet lag wasn't too much of an issue, but still wanted to have that rest day.
that's cool. So first question is, what's the name of the app? And second question is, how many trips to France have you had?
The name of the app is Time Shifter, highly recommended. And you don't even have to be too strict to adhere to their time recommendations, but it's been helpful. I've been to France twice before. One was like a short trip up from above Barcelona in the coast area, the Costa Brava. We went into see Carcassonne and a town whose name I can't remember. I wanted to see the Cathar castles in that area. I'm kind of a history and archaeology nerd.
Okay.
I love anything to do with that. So we went and traveled up there. And then I had been to the Loire Valley a few years after that. It was in November. It was during our Thanksgiving break. And I was with my kids and we had a wonderful time. But yeah, Loire Valley, it reminded me of where I live in November, which was very pastoral, but also misty. And you really miss something not seeing all the gardens in bloom. So
That's true.
it was still a great trip. We went to the city of Nantes, which I love Nantes. It's a fantastic city and the kids loved it too.
How many kids do you have?
I have two kids. I have one who is now 17, which is really hard for me to believe. And I have a 11-year-old. He was, I think, 6 at the time. And he was a hit. He was a hit. We had him go in front of us and say the bonjour to everybody. We called him our bonjour ambassador, and the French loved him. He he helped us get a fantastic reception. I remember being in France and a waitress like gave him her phone number. He went down to meet the chef. I mean, he had the red carpet rolled out for him. So he loves France too.
Fantastic. All right. So you had one night's sleep near the airport, near CDG.
Correct.
What was the name of the hotel? People are going to ask these sorts of questions.
It's the Ibis Styles.
Oh,
so right across the way, I think has some sort of a vague Star Wars theme. We've stayed there before. It's perfectly fine.
Yeah. So you just walked to that.
We took the shuttle, which was kind of a very fast shuttle, but it was good to get a little adrenaline rush right after the flight.
So you took the shuttle, you had a night's sleep, then the next morning you picked up your car and left.
Correct.
Excellent. Okay. And you made your way to Burgundy.
Correct.
So I don't know, shall we take this in the order you did it or by your favorites?
Do it in the order. I think that type of road trip order might be helpful.
Okay, so let's do it that way. Tell me
Sure.
about the first place you visited.
So we first visited the town of Tournus, which was kind of our pit stop. It's in southern Burgundy, I would say about 30 minutes north of Macon. The reason we stopped there wasn't necessarily, it was really just logistical. I had to think about how many hours I thought my mom could really sit in the car after a long trip and if she's too overtired. But then again, the next day we were headed down to the Mediterranean. And so I didn't want a huge chunk of time the next day. So, I really wanted to stay in Dijon, but it still would have been too long of a drive down to the Mediterranean. So it's like, let's pick some place in between that seems still interesting, or at least has some sort of tourism infrastructure.
Right. So Tournus is Tournus.
Yes.
And it's not a town I visited. So you have to tell me what it's like.
Okay. I loved it. I felt pretty proud of myself for finding this place. It's known amongst just regional tourists, apparently, for a really beautiful abbey that I believe, and I can check my notes, first built in the 10th century.
Mm.
And it was built around some some monks from the north of France who came down, brought the relics of Saint Philibert. And I don't know my saints very well, so I don't know
Me
what
neither.
that saint was particularly known for. But they were fleeing Viking invasions. And so they came down to Tournus, I believe. The king of France at the time gave them some land next to the Saône River. And they built an abbey to house these relics, and it became kind of one of the pilgrimage destinations. I think the town itself, Tournus, was a Roman town right along the river. It was a shipping outpost. It had a lot of prehistory in the area. And so the monks built this beautiful stone abbey, and the town kind of really developed alongside it. I have never been to Burgundy before, but in my head, this is kind of what a Burgundian town looks like. On Saturday, the day we woke up, there was a market day that kind of wound through the streets. The abbey was almost at kind of it was like a bit of a hill, and the abbey is, of course, at the top of the hill. And it does have some tourism infrastructure. I know some of the river tours stop there. It's a
Mm.
port, but it still seemed pretty residential as well. So it was a very, very good mix of a few tourists, but also just life. Life was happening. And
Yeah.
we kind of walked through the streets. There was, I can't remember what it's called, but it's one of those medieval hospitals that I know they have in Bonn. And yeah, it's really hard for me to describe it. It was a little bit of a blur. We rented an Airbnb, which was lovely, though that was my first experience in two steep stairs for my mom, but we
Ah.
made it work. We really just kind of used that as a recovery day. We walked around the town. We went to the main square and ate at a cafe. The locals were very, very friendly, very, reserved, but also very polite and very helpful. And the next morning before we left, we got up and we went to the Abbey, I've been to my fair share of abbeys and churches, and this was just really unique. I mean, you could tell the construction was old. It was, in multiple phases. It was preserved. A lot of the stained glass was, I won't say primitive looking, but it didn't have the ornate scenes, but it was still just really beautiful. It's also known for having a very atmospheric crypt underneath. And that was kind of my mother didn't go just because of the stairs, but my friend Jamie and I went, and we were really excited and taking videos, and then just the lights went out. And so she screamed a little. It became a little bit out of like a Halloween movie a bit, but they came back on and we felt a little bit better. But it was another way to get the adrenaline pumping for a long road trip is getting yourself locked in a dark crypt underneath the atmospheric abbey. It was just, I really recommend it. Before we actually went into Tournus, there was I don't know if you want to call it a wine store, but maybe it's a co-op where a lot of the producers from Southern Burgundy sell their wines. And so we did a tasting there too. And I really like those. I mean, come on, it's Burgundian wine. So I'm going to find something to like, even though I'm from California. It was fantastic. It was a highlight, and it was a really interesting town. Not totally overrun, but just beautiful.
Pretty nice. And the prices of the wine, do you remember? Was it
Oh
reasonable
gosh,
compared to California?
yeah. My friend Jamie, she and her husband belong to a number of wine clubs in Napa Valley and Sonoma Valley, and they spoiled me. But it was extremely reasonable in terms of, $15, $20 fantastic bottles of wine, reds, sparklings, the whites I really like. It's very kind of minerally, but I like that. So yeah, I enjoyed it. Very reasonable, friendly folks. We had an issue with the rental car, and we had somebody just an old man in the streets of Burgundy flag us, and we thought he was going to yell at us for parking in the wrong spot, but he was just trying to point out that we needed to be careful with our radiator. And he was very, just almost kind of like our old grandfather looking out for us. It was a very, very lovely feeling.
Yeah. So was there something wrong with your radiator?
It just, I think it was the condensation from the air conditioning. So he
Ah,
was just, be careful.
yeah.
And we were trying to do Google Translate, and he was trying to speak in broken English, and it was a cultural experience, but we felt cared for. We thought it was a really lovely cultural exchange.
Yes, yes. But in the end, the car was fine. That's good.
Yeah, and we put it to its paces afterwards, so it was fine.
Yes. All right. So the next morning, after visiting the Abbey, you set off to go
Yes.
south, I suppose.
We did. We got up, we went through the farmer's market, we went to the Abbey, and then we headed south. This was a little bit of a divergence from my initial plans because I wanted to stay in Provence, but Jamie and my mother, they had never seen the Mediterranean before, and they had that kind of sentimental, we want to stay by the sea. And since Provence was also a lot of our destination still, the compromise was trying to find a place that was, close to Marseille while not being in Marseille, because I was a little worried about overwhelming my mom with a bigger city. And so we stayed in a town called, well, it's Martigues is the town, but the little community is called the Caro. And it's on something called the Côtes Bleu.
La Côte Bleue, yeah.
Côte Bleu, the blue coast right next to, what would you say, it's on the western side of Marseille. And I really just found an Airbnb there that I liked, that I felt met our needs for 4 or 5 days. And the host was lovely. And it was right next to a beautiful little cove, a beach where the townsfolk were there swimming and having a blast. It was a great home base.
Right. So June, the water was probably still a little bit cool.
Jamie and I, we were going to swim regardless, but that first day, it was a rude awakening. I knew it was going to happen, but it was still cold.
Yes. Was it a rocky beach or sandy beach?
It was actually a sandy beach.
Ah,
A little pebbly. It was just, the series of coves. I wouldn't call it a calanque by any stretch of the imagination, but it was like a micro calanque or something. It's just very small, sandy, kind of covey, gentle sloped. It was nice.
my daughter is actually down in this area today. Just earlier today, she sent me a photo of a little beach where she is, and it's little pebbles. So in that area, you have both pebbles and sandy. It just depends on exactly where you are.
Yes.
Huh?
Yes.
So you just need to look it up if that matters to you.
Yes. Yeah, I did for my day job. I'm a librarian and I'm a researcher, and I do extensive research on these types of things. So I wasn't just, this looks nice. It was like doing the Google Street View and making little custom maps and doing a lot of different things to, you can plan a lot and you just don't know until you get there. But I was, since I had some folks, I wanted to make sure they had a good time, especially my mom. I put a lot of effort into trying to find the right locations.
Yeah. And, you can find out a lot about looking at Google Street View.
Oh, absolutely.
It's totally worth doing, even if, and I'm sure a lot of people are nodding their heads. They are also hyper planners, or they wouldn't be listening to this podcast.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I do the Street View. I learned a trick where, I had somebody say, I read on a forum that you think about the destinations you most want to visit and, essentially do like a custom map around those areas to make sure to help you kind of map your trip. I read reviews of destinations nearby and I make sure to sort by French because I want to see, then I translate the reviews, but I want to see the perspective of the French tourists, the local tourists, because I feel like they just have a better sense of, what is good service or what to expect versus other folks who might not be as realistic.
Right. And French people are demanding in a French way. They don't have the same expectations as Americans. That's an important thing to do if you can. All right. But you also went into Vaison-la-Romaine, Carpentras, Gigondas.
Yes, we gave my mom a rest day just because I knew I wanted to set her up in a place where I knew she would feel comfortable just watching TV and sleeping in. And so Jamie and I've always wanted to go. I've never been to Provence. I've never been to the southern part of France. And so kind of the romance of it was in my head. And I wanted to see some of the attractions that most interested me. And so I've always wanted to go to a provincial market, a flea market or antique market. I'm more of a low-end shopper than I am a high-end shopper. So I looked up Sunday markets. I know there's the very famous Sunday market in the multi-hyphenated town that I'm not.
L'Île-sur-la-Sorgue.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for saying it, so I didn't have to. And so it's like, I thought, and I had read the review saying it's lovely, but it's also for the Sunday market days, it could be really overrun with tourists.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, I'm one of those obnoxious tourists where I'm like, oh, other tourists. I don't want to be around other tourists. But then again, I am still a tourist and I think it's important to be where there is some tourism infrastructure. And so
Yeah.
I read about Carpentras, and I read that they have a nice, a little bit more low key Sunday market, which it definitely was. It wasn't, I thought it was going to be bigger. It pretty much was the size of, say, like 2/3 of the town parking lot. And the vendors were all local kind of antique vendors. There were some really interesting vendors, but it wasn't super overwhelming. And we found a parking spot really quickly, which was surprising.
Yeah.
And we just kind of had a stroll around the market, got a few little vintage postcards. We just wanted to have a stroll and look at the wares. And so we did.
Mhm.
And it didn't have to take our entire day like I thought maybe the other market would. Because Jamie is very interested in wine, my friend, and her husband in particular loves like the big, bold red wines from California, which, in that region of France, it's not necessarily known for.
Right.
I looked up a place called, which isn't too far from there. It's kind of up the mountain. And we made it up. We walked into the local wine tasting room, wine store. I think what I had read is that the Gigondas is very similar to Châteauneuf-du-Pape in terms of like not necessarily the quality, but like the style of wine.
Mhm.
And Châteauneuf-du-Pape seemed a little expensive for my tastes.
Yeah.
And so Gigondas seemed like a very good alternative. And so we drove up to the town. We had, went to a cafe and had lunch, just Jamie and I. We went wine tasting. They were fantastic. They were just bold and smooth. And the person giving us pours explained about the terroir, and he bonded with Jamie because Jamie has a French last name because she married into a French Canadian family. And so I think the person's husband, that was his wife's last name. And so we're like, oh, well, we're cousins, I guess. Yeah. And so we ordered some wines to be shipped to us,
Oh,
and they don't ship them until the weather gets cooler. So around Thanksgiving time, we're going to be breaking open some new Gigondas bottles of wine.
was that expensive to get it shipped?
It was pretty expensive. Jamie's more of the wine aficionado, so it wasn't expensive when you split the cost of it. The bottles themselves were anywhere from 10 to 25 to maybe $30 at most. But when you're shipping them, you're adding in the shipping costs, it was around like $45 a bottle, which, it's still pricey, but we're splitting it and it's for a special occasion.
Right,
So
right. So there are people who bring an extra suitcase. There are actually
we did
wine
that too.
Okay.
We did
There are
that too.
wine suitcases you can buy that are made for that. I saw one. I was surprised. I was like, our friends came to visit and they brought an extra suitcase that was made for wine. I was like, oh, I've never seen anything like this. Interesting.
Jamie brought one. Jamie brought one specifically for wine as well because she loves wine. And I ended up taking some of the room I'm more of a honey and an oil fan. So I took some of the room up for honey and olive oil, but it came in handy.
Yeah, yeah. Fantastic. So you had, I mean, just to touch up on what you said, the Châteauneuf-du-Pape, I haven't had extensive tastings, but the last place we went, I didn't think it was all that, I didn't think it was worth the price. I mean, whenever we go wine tasting anywhere, we stop somewhere, we just always buy 6 bottles.
Okay.
Like we did this just recently in Sancerre. We found the shop that was open. We bought 6 bottles, put it in the car, drove off. I never go anywhere and buy fewer than 6 bottles. In Saint-Châteauneuf-du-Pape, I just bought the one because I was like, I don't like it that much,
Yeah.
So,
I was afraid that was going to happen in Châteauneuf-du-Pape. I mean, my mom was very interested in it. It's very fun to say from an English speaker perspective. So that's, I think, part of like, oh, Châteauneuf-du-Pape. Like everybody loves to say it. What I had done before is I had gone to some wine stores here in California, thought about the regions we were going to visit, tried to buy some bottles in advance to see what we liked and we didn't like. And the one bottle I could not bring myself to buy was a Châteauneuf-du-Pape, just because with import fees, even in California, it was punishingly expensive. And it's like, if I love it, I don't want to be stuck buying it all the time.
That is a good point.
Yes. So I think Gigondas, I did some additional research. And so if you like it in theory, but you don't like the price, I would love to recommend Gigondas. And it's just a really picturesque spot. It's a small town. It's perched up on the hill. You could see all the valley below. Some great places to eat there. I think it's a good happy medium where you get some of that quality, some a little bit bolder of a red than you would find in Burgundy or Bordeaux. And the price is right.
Excellent. Then you went to Grasse and Saint-Maxime.
Yes. Well, at the end of that day, we went to Vaison-la-Romaine.
Oh, yeah, Vaison-la-Romaine, yes.
Like I said, I'm an archaeology fan, and so I wanted to see the ruins there. The most interesting part of that is the weather was really unsettled. That's the one thing French folks talked to us about the entire time. It's like, oh, you came at a terrible time. The weather is so unsettled. It was nice coming from the heat of California to have some rain and some overcast days, so it didn't bother us. But we understood what they meant that day because we got caught in a very ferocious hailstorm right in the middle of the archaeological park. It was shocking to see just storm clouds roll over like Mount Ventoux and just all of a sudden unleash a hailstorm on us. And so we were running around with our shoes off, trying to find shelter. Some of the workers there thought we were absolutely hilarious for trying to, put bags over our head and run around. And they were very entertained by our antics, which I appreciated. At one time, we were like stooped under a tree trying to take a video, and then some car rolls by and completely like splashes me. And my friends, Jamie's laughing hysterically in the background. It was an experience. It was an adventure.
All right.
And so the next day I don't know the next day, but we went up and we went to Grasse. It was just a wonderful experience making perfume.
Mm-hmm. I think that's what you listed as your
it was one
activity.
Absolutely, because it was one where we were all in agreement that we liked the best. Both myself, my mom, and Jamie love perfumes and cosmetics. I saw this workshop. There's a number of them in that town. This one just worked out timing wise. It was a drive from where we were on the other side of Marseille, but it was worth it.
Because you were doing this as day trips.
Yeah. That, in retrospect, I probably would have stationed myself a little bit closer to that.
Easier to do it from Nice.
Absolutely. As the crow flies, it doesn't look so bad distance-wise, but there
those
are
roads,
hills and roads, and it was...
and those freeways are so busy.
Oh my gosh.
So busy. California busy.
We were prepared for the freeways. We weren't necessarily prepared for the tiny winding roads up the hill, speed bumps in the middle of nowhere. We actually started a game of like trying to guess how many, we were betting on how many roundabouts we would hit. It's like, well, on this stretch, we're going to hit 25. Yeah, we had our little road games we invented. So
did you get to like them in the end?
Yes. I mean, I love roundabouts. I think they're a revelation for traffic here.
All right. That's good.
So the speed bumps in the middle of nowhere, on the other hand, that's pretty jarring, literally and figuratively. So we went to Grasse. We was at Michelin-starred fragrances. It was a bit of a challenge for my mom just because it was up on the side of a hill. Even their handicap parking, which we used her handicap placard, which worked really well throughout France, but it was still a bit of a difficult walk up to the hill. Mm-hmm. My mom still said it was worth it, more than worth it. And we sat, they explained kind of the fragrance pyramid and base notes and top notes and had us go through a perfumer's organ. It was really interesting because they would have you smell the caps of the fragrances that you like the most. And then you would kind of pull those out, dip a little piece of paper into the fragrance. And so essentially they had a ney, or I don't know if she was in training, but she was amazing. And so she basically took all the scents that we had labeled and dipped, rearranged them, kind of fanned them in front of our face to say, like, do you like the way that smells? Do you like the way that smells? Would kind of reconfigure it based on what we liked. And then just would kind of smell it herself and say, like, okay, well, if you want to make this into a perfume, you need to add this, 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 and this. We did that. It was a little, kind of like a little chemistry experiment where we had to drop hers in there. My mom loved this because she smelled what my mom had kind of picked out and was like, this is absolutely perfect. You don't need to add anything to this, which she was the only person in the entire class for that happened to. So
that's good.
It was very happy.
Your mom has a nose.
Exactly, right. We made all of our perfumes, and I'm sure if any of you have, if you've attended one of those, they kind of label your creation, and then you could always order it from that perfume house. And they said, as long as you're alive, you can order it from us.
Wow, that's great.
Okay. which was great. And we all had something that smelled a little bit different. My mom's was very fresh. Mine ended up smelling like peach Coca-Cola in some strange way, but it still worked. And Jamie's was very kind of bold and sensual. We spent some time on the road trying to invent names for our perfumes because we had a lot of time in the car. So that just, we all loved it. We all created something. My mom got that extra boost from participating in that. And then we went to the coast to have lunch, St. Maxime, which was also another sandy beach. And highly recommended. It's beautiful. And then we drove home and it was a day that exhausted us, but it was worth it.
Wonderful. All right, we got to move on because we don't have a lot of time left. Ardèche. Okay, this is one place that we don't talk about very much on the podcast. You did an overnight at Charmes-sur-Rhône.
That was one of the ones where we were trying to have a stop in between the Mediterranean and Loire, but we didn't want to just go back to Burgundy. And I picked the hotel based on the fact that it had a Michelin-starred restaurant and got very good reviews. We wanted to try it. We hadn't really tried a Michelin-starred restaurant before. I thought, when in France, why not?
Yeah.
And I picked one that looked a little bit more down to earth, but still an amazing, mind-blowing experience. But while we were traveling up there, we just discovered what an absolutely stunning area this is, right?
Yeah.
Kind of along the Rhone River Valley, seeing the big river. I'm not a cruise person, but I did see some of those riverboat cruises and I thought, okay, there might be something to that.
Yes, there is something to that. Yes.
It's beautiful. And so it was just kind of a stay along the river in Charmes-sur-Rhône. And the hotel that we stayed at, which I probably can't pronounce very well, Le Carré de Alephius. So it's based off, there was a Roman senator. Apparently his tomb is in the city hall. You can go see it. And it's based on that. Roman senator is the name of the hotel / Michelin-starred restaurant. It's a very small hotel, humble. It's lovely, well thought out, but the restaurant was so good. It was an amazing experience.
Oh, good. So that's called Le Carré d'Alephius.
Thank you.
And I will have all of that in the show notes for people.
Get the cheese board. The cheese board's incredible. I've never seen anything in it. I don't want to sound too, I'm hokey, like, oh, I've never seen a cheese board in my life, but it just next level.
Next level, eh?
Yes.
Very good. Fantastic. And that was just for one overnight.
One overnight.
And then you moved on to the Loire.
We did. We drove through an area near Saint Etienne. And even before I knew, it's like, this looks like Pennsylvania. It's like we're going through the Alleghenies and coal country, and I guess it's coal country.
Sure enough, it is.
So we had a short stop at a town called Rouen. We stopped there just for a pit stop. I wanted to try French tacos, and I regretted it. I'm sorry. Apologies to the French gourmands, but
it's awful.
It's wow. There's so many layers of goo. I don't even know how you guys deal with it.
Yes. I had my first French taco this week, by the way, and never again. My first, yes. I have seen my husband eat them, and I always thought, I'm not having that. This time I thought, I was very hungry, and I thought, okay, this is probably 1,000,000 calories, and I'm hungry. So I had it. And yes, I ate it, but never again. It doesn't even taste that great. And it's layers of goo, like you said.
Layers of goo. Never have I seen this much goo crammed into one vessel. So
yes,
beware. Nothing like tacos. Nothing like a gyro or anything. Okay, that's a separate podcast of me complaining about French tacos. So yeah, we did that. We also stopped. It's supposed to be an up and coming wine region, and we stopped at a wine cave, and we got a couple of bottles. And I know you're okay with us talking about terrible things on this podcast.
Yes.
But I don't know if the wine was terrible, but there was something wrong with it. We ended up not even bringing it back because it's like, I think it was corked. And because the cork crumbled, it tasted like vinegar.
Oh,
maybe this needs a few days to breathe.
No.
It did not. It was bad. So I'm hoping that was just a fluke because the area are these beautiful rolling hills and it was nice.
So this is wine you bought in Rouen.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think it can't.
Was it a wine shop?
It's a wine shop. And he was very, we talked to him. It's like most typical of this region. And he knew exactly what he wanted. I don't know if he was like, let's get these busted bottles of wine and pawn them off on these tourists.
Could be.
he didn't seem like it,
You
but
never
yeah,
know.
it was, I don't know. And it's supposed to be like Beaujolais based. So it's like I know Beaujolais enough to know what it should taste like, and it should not taste like red wine vinegar.
Yeah.
So if the Rouen Tourism Board wants to sponsor me to come back and try more, I'm definitely up for it.
But
Um,
otherwise, no.
Otherwise, yeah, but it's a beautiful area.
Yeah.
And so we went kind of on the other side and kind of worked our way back up to the Loire Valley. And that area, I mean, it's very pastoral and very hilly. It reminds me of the Sierra Nevada foothills here in California. It's just stunning. It's so beautiful. France in general is beautiful, but that area was kind of took me by surprise. And so we went to a B&B outside of Cheverny, and that was one of our highlights. It was such a fantastic place.
So B&B. So what was the name of the B&B? Let's see. Did you
So,
write it down?
I did write it down, and I'm going to butcher it.
Domaine de la Rabouillère B&B.
Yes, and I think I looked up Rabouillère, which doesn't have a lot of English translation, but
No, it
it's
doesn't mean anything.
it's a rabbit's warren. It's apparently where female rabbits go to give birth.
That's a new one on me.
That's the researcher. The researcher come through. It's like, I will find the definition of this
Well, good
word.
for you. I mean, I look at this, Rabouillère, okay, whatever. But this name to me is, oh, good. Good, good.
Okay. And there were some giant rabbits around there. So,
Well.
yes. So we did that, and we used that as a home base for the next 5 days. We had some must-sees that my mother absolutely had to see. One of her obsessions from reading all those books about France was Eleanor of Aquitaine.
Yes, of
And
course.
I had listened to podcasts and done my research enough to know that, you know, we definitely had to go to the Fontevraud Abbey.
Yes.
It was a little disappointing for her just
Uh-huh.
because it just, it was a prison, right? And they stripped everything, but it still was a lovely experience. We ate at the restaurant there. We ended up going, thinking it was just, we booked a restaurant. Apparently it was a tasting experience.
Uh-huh.
And it was a little bit, it was beautiful and it was wonderful. And it was just a little esoteric. It was like, we're basing this meal off the monk who would steal down from the hills to steal things from the garden. And he had very expensive taste, this hermit who would, come down and steal our stuff. And so we were inspired by his expensive tastes and his thievery. And so we created this tasting menu to honor him. And then they had like a map of all the places he would steal from. And clearly the meal really proved that he did have some really exceptional taste, the thieving hermit of the Abbey. But it was great. It was beautiful. I think I'm addicted to high-end dining experiences now, thanks to this. But the Abbey was a beautiful Chenonceau she had to see because she had read all about that as well. And
Sure.
so we did the boat tour of kind of going up and under, then kind of walked around. And I had a much more down to earth dining experience at that cafeteria, which was great.
Yeah. I want to highlight the fact that you really, really liked this B&B near Cheverny, which makes it very good. I mean, it's a good place to. A lot of people ask me where to base yourself out of when you're visiting the Loire Valley. It's a hard question to answer because it really depends. I mean, it's a river, it's long.
Yes.
So it's great that you recommend this place. You say the breakfast was good, very kind owners, charming dog, comfortable
Dog.
bed. Define comfortable bed.
I think it struck the right balance between a very firm mattress and very comfortable bedding. We had been to some places before where the mattresses were exceptionally firm, which is good for your back, but it's not exactly something that you could snuggle into after a long day.
Yes, yes.
And so it was, the linens were high quality. Everything was just
Not too
well
hard.
done. Not too hard, not too soft, but the kind of the Goldilocks zone.
Excellent.
And it was like a separate, almost like a gîte or a small cottage on the property. And usually when you rent the small gîtes on the B&B properties, you don't get breakfast or you have to pay extra. But this was included. And, we didn't even have to leave. He would bring it in and set it up for us. And we'd just call him to come take it. His English, he was very insecure about his English, although like most French people, when they're insecure about their English, it's pretty much flawless. But they grew honey on the property, not grew honey. They produced honey on the property.
Mhm.
He included it in the breakfast. It was mind-blowingly good. And he was just so charming and sweet. He kind of gave off like dad energy because he was
Mm.
always like wanting to check in. We took a day trip to Paris from there, and my mom stayed, and so he checked in with my mom, like, are the girls back yet? Have they made it? Is everything okay? It was very attentive, caring service in a beautiful family-run property. I would go just to stay there and go nowhere,
Mhm.
go nowhere
So
else
day
in the
trip
valley.
to
Yes.
Paris, you drove into Paris?
We actually no, we drove into Orléans to the train station there and took a train there. I didn't want to deal with driving anywhere near
Okay.
Paris. And
Okay.
so, yeah, it was great because my friend had never been to Paris before and she just wanted to tick that off her box. Although, she went to the Louvre and was completely overwhelmed by the crowds. I wanted no part of that. Just had to check it off her list. And so, I did.
Yeah. And then the last place you stayed was in Chantilly.
Yes. It's a beautiful town. The chateau itself, we were a little chateaued out by this point. We had been to quite a few. And so we did we walked around the grounds, didn't really go in there, but wow, it's
Stunning,
beautiful.
yeah.
Oh
Yeah.
my gosh, wow. I don't know why more people don't visit it.
Yeah, it's very nice.
It stood up to anything in the Loire Valley. I mean, it was
And
beautiful.
you stayed there because you wanted to be close to your CDG departure the next morning.
Correct. I think they had started, we looked at some of the airport hotels and the prices, and they had all of a sudden gone
Berserk.
triple. And it's like, I'm wondering, well, is this like the lead up to the Olympics where they're just going to start,
Right.
just 10 miles up the road in Chantilly, everything was really reasonable. And we're next to a beautiful chateau.
Okay, that sounds good.
Check, check.
Very good. All right. So we have been talking a long time. We need to stop.
Wrap it
But
up.
your notes were excellent as well for researchers. So I will post those linked
Yes.
to the main episode page for this episode.
Yeah.
And overall, do you have any advice for people who want to do a trip like this with their mother or with an elderly relative?
Yes, I do have some advice, and I'll try to make it as brief as I can manage. One thing that I didn't really convey very well throughout this is that my mom has reduced mobility. Not, complete no mobility, but had a stroke, is a very slow walker, unsteady on her feet.
Mhm.
And so I, wanted to stay close to city centers and atmospheric locations. And one thing that I didn't do is do my due diligence as much as I should in terms of verifying staircases and things that, don't make a difference to me, but as somebody with limited mobility, they do. And, all of our hosts were wonderful, welcoming. If I would have just called or sent them an email in advance, I'm sure they
Right.
would have given me more of a heads up. So my recommendation is maybe to think more about staying in the hotels, as much as it pains me to say, staying in a chain hotel or something where maybe there's that legal governmental requirement to, if you're going to say this is accessible, it's going to be an accessible room. So
Right.
so
So
I would,
accessible room in French,
yes.
you ask for a PMR room,
Okay,
which means personne à mobilité réduite.
sure.
So if the room is labeled PMR, it has to be accessible for a wheelchair user, which means that there's going to be either an easy ramp or an elevator or no stairs.
Exactly. I think when you look at the description and it says only one staircase, because my mom said I can go up the staircase as long as it has a rail. Well, great. Most of those places have a staircase, but there are steps to even get to the staircase.
Yes.
Steps up and down. We kind of joked like these are the hidden stairs. There's always hidden stairs or hidden hills or
Yes.
hidden obstructions. And so, I would recommend going for the surety of more of a chain, or at least just taking that extra step to reach out to folks about it.
Yes.
That was the one thing I could have done differently. And that's the advice to give to somebody. It's doable, especially with extensive research, but just be on the safe side with your accommodations.
Right. And also realize that very often in France, the bathrooms are in the basement.
Yes.
So you
we
go
dealt
use
with
the
that.
bathroom in a restaurant, and at
Yeah.
least half of the time it's in the basement.
And with restaurants too, I love family. I like to keep the money that I'm spending in the communities and family run restaurants. And My mom made it, but there were some where it was just like, "Oh, well, we have your table. It's at the top of the spiral staircase in the attic."
Mm.
Uh, well, yeah, okay. Either we can't do it or she's really gonna have to dig deep for this. And so we had a few of those experiences. It didn't take away from the overall experience, but
But
it
these are difficulties that pile up.
absolutely. And as a 40-year-old who doesn't have these challenges, I don't necessarily think of that. But if you're planning for somebody with limited mobility, I would definitely do not hesitate to reach out and ask about, logistics or go with a safer bet.
Vanessa, thank you so much for talking to me.
All
I'm
right.
sure it's going to be very helpful to people who are planning trips with their family members, especially elderly family members,
Yes.
because you got to make the most of the time you have on Earth. And having a trip to France once in a while makes life better.
Absolutely. She wants to go again already. And it's like, well, let's see what my brother's doing. He can take you next. Uh,
Wonderful. Merci
all
beaucoup,
right.
Vanessa.
Merci. Thank
Au
you.
revoir. Again, I want to thank my patrons for giving back and supporting the show. Patrons get several exclusive rewards. For doing so, you can see them at patreon.com/join us, Patreon. Join us, no spaces or dashes. And a special shout out this week to my new Join Us in France champions, Josh Stewart, Mike Carter, Jody Flood, Christine Cunningham, and Neva. And thank you, Craig Rudder, for upgrading your membership to yearly support. Would you join them too? You can do it for as little as $3 a month, but if you can afford it, I would love to have you pledge more so you can have access to more of the rewards. And of course, when you join at one of the higher tiers, you also have access to lots and lots of previous rewards. I have worked on this for years now. Go to patreon.com/join us. And to support Elise, go to patreon.com/EliseArt, ELYSART. This week, I published details of a great walk in Paris between the Moulin Rouge and Passage Jouffroy with some descriptions and a short video and things like that. So it's good to have a plan for a fun walk in Paris. And this week, I also published my new Paris tour on the Voice Map app, which I've called Paris's Gothic Jewels, Notre Dame Cathedral, Sainte-Chapelle, and the Conciergerie. Now, this is a tour that takes you both inside and out of these three monuments. It's very, very well crafted. And this is probably the last Paris Voice Map tour I'm going to write because this is a huge undertaking. It took me 10 full days of doing nothing else from 9 a.m. until 7 p.m. Every detail is examined about the path I take you on, the stories I share, the audio, because unlike the podcast, the tours have sound effects and musical bits to enhance the experience. There are photos to help you find your way and also help you see things that are hard to see. And in the Sainte-Chapelle, trust me, there are a lot of things that are hard to see. These voice map tours are a full immersive experience. And these are great because you can take them at your own pace without needing to make a reservation. They don't cost very much. They are just awesome, and I love them. But it's so much work, I think I might be done. Many of you have never tried one, and you might be hesitant, I understand. You might think, let's try to join a group, have a live guide. And while there are some great live guides, most of them are not that great. First of all, in this gig economy, the guides you find on the big platforms that you've heard of are mostly very young. They're not French originally. There is a huge demand for guides who can speak English for a few months, and then it all dries up. The platforms take huge commissions. These guys don't get paid that much. Lots of these young people do the job for one season, if they last that long, and then they find something more stable, more rewarding, less difficult, because sometimes dealing with tourists is not the easiest thing in the world. You'll find some seasoned guides in Paris, but they mostly have full-time employment in museums. So just know that booking a live tour in Paris is not always a guarantee, In my opinion, there are more downsides than upsides. And the price of these live tours is another problem. They cost minimum $50 per person, and you'll pay the same amount for a great guide as you will for a mediocre one. And you really don't know what you're going to get. So if you enjoy the work that I do, if you like my style, if you think I know France and Paris pretty well, then try one of my tours. It's literally taking me in your pocket. Make me happy and get my new baby. Paris's Gothic jewels, Notre Dame Cathedral, Sainte-Chapelle, and the Conciergerie. And podcast listeners get a big discount for buying these tours from my website. It is wonderful because the cost is really, really great, but only do that if you're not in a big hurry. It might take a few hours, perhaps a few days for you to get the codes. And please, 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 if you take my latest tour, Paris's Gothic Jewels, leave a review because it's impossible to sell digital products that don't have dozens of reviews. That's how the world works these days. So yeah, I would love it if you would try it. And you can actually do it from home because this is one where there are several photos at every stop. And so you could just listen to it at home. People ask me for restaurant recommendations all the time, and I sometimes hesitate to give any unless I've been there and I can tell you that it's legit, So while in Paris, I tried some new restaurants. I also went to some old ones again. There were 4 new restaurants that I want to tell you about. Le Petit Châtelet on rue 39, rue de la Bûcherie. It's right by Shakespeare and Company, and if you get the table upstairs by the window, you get a great view of Notre Dame. I was there with my sister-in-law, Stephanie, and she really, really loved it. I let her have the view. The only place you can have a view like that is if you go to La Tour d'Argent, and, that's expensive. Another place we went to with Stephanie was Le Bistrot des Victoires. That's on number 6, rue de la Vrillière, in the 1st arrondissement. It's near the Palais Royal. This is one that was recommended by a friend of my daughter's. She works at the Ministère de la Culture at the Palais Royal. Her name is Ambre. And because I know she works there and she comes home once in a while, we live in the same village, literally a stone's throw away from my place. I asked her for inexpensive places for lunch right around where she works, because this is an area that has a lot of restaurants, but some of them are pretty pricey. She gave me a list, and her list included a lot of Asian places. She's very interested in Japan, and she speaks Japanese very well. So one of them, though, she knows me. She knows I like to eat. So she recommended one place, this one, Le Bistrot des Victoires. It's not a bouillon per se, but it's that sort of restaurant. It's old style. It's very full. People enjoy just the same dishes over and over again. And it was really inexpensive for the food we got. It was just everything they served us was perfectly executed. It was not fancy looking, but it was just great. And the wait staff was lovely. I really had a good laugh with the waitress who was taking care of us. She had a great sense of humor. And of course, because I was there with my sister-in-law, I didn't say any words in English, right? I was just speaking French with her. And so it was a very different feel. It's interesting. When I'm with other people, because I am French all the time, but if I'm with other people who I speak English with, they just assume I'm an American. And the treatment is different. If they don't hear me speak any English, they just, French person. And the banter and the conversations are different. Let's put it this way. At this Bistrot des Victoires, you need to get there by noon or it will be full. They might do a second service starting at 1 or 1:15 or 1:30, but I'm not certain. It's not huge, but it's definitely worth a try. Another place, and this is the one that was very strange, was Bouillon Chartier, Grand Boulevard. All right, so this one is it's on 7 rue Faubourg Montmartre. It's right by the Passage Jouffroy. And I walk in and I was by myself. It was right around 12:30 or something. And the guy takes me to a table and says, right here. And there was already a woman sitting there. And these are not big tables, okay? These are really, really small tables. Like my knees could touch hers once I sat. And I was like, you want me to sit with madame? Je m'assois avec madame? Elle me dit oui. Yeah, he says, yeah, that's where you're going to So surprised that had never happened to me before. Now, at a bar, like if you're at a bar and you're eating at the bar, you can be side by side with other people. But face to face with someone you don't know was very strange. I just thought, okay, what do I do? And so I got the menu and I was looking at the menu thinking, and then I look at her. Of course, I had said bonjour before I sat down, okay, with this lady. Bonjour, madame. And she responded, bonjour, madame, très bien. And she was a little older than me, but, about the same age. I sit down, I don't say much. I'm looking at my menu thinking, oh, what the hell? And she was eating her food. She wasn't paying any attention to me, really. So I thought, okay, I'm going to ask her, what's good here? Like an icebreaker. And so she told me that she had been there 50 years ago, and she pointed at a table with her husband. And I was like, oh, wow. So immediately I'm thinking, okay, what happened to the husband? But I mean, I don't know this woman. I don't want to ask her what happened to your husband. So I just said, cool. Yes, that's great. So what's good to eat? And she told me what she tried. And she didn't really know what was good to eat, but I picked something that was actually very plain. It was good, but, it wasn't anything to write home about. The food was fine. It's very fast service and friendly, I suppose. And so with this lady, we chatted for about 20 minutes. She had her dessert while I was having my main dish. And then she left by the time I was having my dessert. But it was the really strange thing. And she asked me what I was doing in Paris. So I told her about the podcast. And I realized just now she might be listening because I gave her my card. And if you are, my dear lady, don't be mad at me. Didn't know what to say about your husband. That was the part that kind of threw me off. But I am glad we got to sit and enjoy a meal together because you were lovely. So you never know who you're going to meet in Paris, right? Especially if you eat by yourself. It's kind of interesting. I also went back to the Saint-Régis restaurant by the cathedral, by Notre Dame. And I met a lady who had been on a tour with me years ago that said she was in Paris. And we said hi, and it was lovely seeing her and her friend that she was visiting. And I also went back to l'Auberge des Deux Ponts, also near Notre Dame, where my favorite soup Nazi works. I don't know if I told you about this one. This guy is, you never know if he's going to serve you or not. So while I was there this time, I got there like at 12:15, and I was the only person in the restaurant. At that point, 2 people came and asked for a table. I had called him. You don't show up at this place. You call to make sure it's okay. And I called and I said, I'm coming. It's just me. Is that okay? Yes, it's fine. Come. Okay. And then while I was sitting there considering what I was going to have, 2 people came and asked for a table, and he turned them both away. But he didn't have anybody else to serve until I was ready to leave because I was the only person he was serving. So it went pretty fast. He's the cook and waiter. It's kind of interesting. And by the time I was having my dessert, a big table of 6 arrived, and then a big table of 4 arrived. And it's true that they had reserved and he couldn't. But I mean, if he had hurried, these 2 people there, he could have served them quickly and, rushed them out of the door to have room for the big table. I don't know. It's a tiny little restaurant. It's very quirky, but he's a good cook. So what can I tell you? I'm a sucker for a good cook. My thanks to podcast editors Anne and Christian Codovan, who produce the transcripts and make it sound good. Next week on the podcast, an episode with Elise about the marvelous Cézanne. Now, there's going to be a lot of Cézanne stuff happening in France this year, and you don't want to miss this one. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you join me next time so we can look around France together. Au revoir. The Join Us in France Travel Podcast is written, hosted, and produced by Annie Sargent and copyright 2025 by Addicted to France. It is released under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives license.